Well, tēnā koutou katoa. No America ho no te timatanga, no Otatahi toku kainga inaine, e roia tokutunga mahi o Perryfield Lawyers, ko Stephen Motoko Ingoa, no reira namihi kia koutou katoa. Hey, it's really great to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, giving up a bit of your day to join Danuki and I. We're excited about this because this paper I actually have the physical copy. We were editing it right up to this morning. And we're really excited about it because it's been kind of a long time in the making. And I'll go into a bit of the history when we get formally started. But we're really grateful that you've taken a bit of time to be here and to have a discussion on this topic. So I thought we'd start with a little karakia to begin. So take a breath and have a listen to this. Whakataka te hao ki te uru, whakataka te hao ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei Maori ora. And the English translation, I love this one. For those of you who haven't met me yet, I do a podcast called Seeds and had an explanation for episode 100 of this karakia. And it's actually the most downloaded episode of all time. But the translation is, get ready for the westerly and be prepared for the southerly. It will be icy cold inland and icy cold on the shore. May the dawn rise red tipped on ice, on snow, on frost, a glorious day. So we have some time together. We would love it if you use the chat function. We know many of you can use it because we can see the weather forecast over there. You've let us know what it's like where you are. We would love to hear questions that you've got. And at the end of the session, we're going to go through and we'll answer as many as we can. And we would love to hear any thoughts that you've got. We're really open to anything, to be honest. So feel free to use the chat function. My name is Stephen Moe. I'm a partner at Perryfield Lawyers, and I'm the head of what we call our impact team. So we focus on purpose and impact, helping both charities as well as for-purpose companies and entities that are doing some good in the world. I have an accent, but moved to New Zealand way back in 1984. So grew up here, went to Canterbury University, worked in Wellington, and then I worked offshore as well in Tokyo, London, and Sydney. 9 years ago, when I came back, I thought, how can I reinvent my career to be focused on impact and purpose? So that's kind of what's led to what we do today. And we really love preparing these sort of thought pieces or thought leadership, challenging the assumptions and how do we do things. So that's a bit about me, but I'm really lucky. I have my co-author here, Danuki. So would you like to say a few words from your perspective?
Hi everyone. So my name's Tanuki. I have a background in consulting and I've been a solicitor at Perryfield for about 5 months now. Yeah, and it's been really wonderful. It's been great to work in the impact team and to get to work on projects like this alongside all the legal work we get to do.
Yep, it's really good. So thank you in advance for contributing here, and it's been great to work with you on this paper. So hopefully, I emailed this out. Hopefully, you've been able to get a copy, at least a PDF, an online one. And I just thought I'd mention the background. So basically, I deal with lots of charities, and a lot of people will come and say, we want to do some good in the world, but we're not yet ready to set up a charity. Like, we don't want to go the formal route. We don't want to, it's just three of us. We just have this, we want to help these children or we want to help this particular cause. Is there any option for us? Like we don't want to have a trust board or anything. And so that's what really introduced me to the idea of fund holding. And fund holding, to put it really simply, is holding funds for another group. So the main way that I've seen it is where you have a small community group, they literally have $500 or $1,000 or, very low scale. But they don't have a bank account. They don't have the formal recognition that we would maybe expect of a charity or, a formally registered entity. And so one option for them is to go to another charity and say, our purposes align with your purposes. So your trust deed sets out purposes. What we want to do is under the umbrella of what you already do. Would you consider fund holding for us? In other countries, we've seen it called auspicing. There's a few different phrases, isn't there, from around
Hmm.
the world? But that's the basic premise. So about 5 years ago, I realized that there was a number of people asking me about fund holding. How do you do it? What does it look like? And that was the start. So this is COVID. It's hard to believe it's like 5 years ago now,
Yes.
but time flies, doesn't it? So it was around COVID that we started assembling a paper. And I want to give a shout out to Alana Irving, who I think is on the call. She was really instrumental in helping to shape some of the initial thoughts there. And as also Cheryl Spain, she's on the call as well, I think. There and Kate Frickberg as well, who I'll get to. Those people were really helpful in bouncing ideas around. Kate, in particular, even commissioned us to prepare a fund holding agreement, like a draft, and we've gotten her permission to open source it. So, in the schedule to this paper, you'll see that there is a draft of a fund holding agreement. Like, what might it look like if you're a charity that wants to do this for others? And the intent there, I'm sure Kate would agree, is that we want to empower different groups to be able to do it. Danuki, maybe could you give us an overview? What we'll do is just run through the paper, and we will look for questions as they come into the chat. The idea here is not that you've already read the paper because we were literally finalizing it this morning, but we thought we would give you a little bit of an overview so that you can then take it away with you. The other thing is we really encourage it, share it. Like, please don't feel like this is something that you can't tell other people about. We would welcome it if you forward it onto a board or somebody that is looking at it, or a group that you know is considering fund holding, because then they can get some information as well. Yeah, so Alana's just posted here, will the paper be hosted on the Perryfield website? Just wondering if that's the best way to share. Yeah, so that's a great point, and it is being loaded up onto the website. This video, we're recording it, so we're going to put that on the website next to the paper. So after this, we'll send a link to that particular place, and then people can watch the video and they can download the paper. Um, but you're welcome. So you can send the link, or if you've got that email that I just sent, you're welcome to forward that as well. We don't mind. So why don't we step back from it and should we start with this? What is a
Hmm.
charity? Do you want to talk briefly on like what were we thinking about when
Hmm.
we come to this? What is a charity?
Yeah. So yeah, like Stephen said, uh, I guess the idea behind the paper was giving a broad kind of understanding of a relatively new topic to New Zealand. And I'm sure many of you on the call will know what a charity is, but I think something that groups may miss when going into the idea of forming a charity is that really considering if a charity is like a formal registered charity is the best option for them, and is there another way they can carry out their work and impact their community and help their community without going through all of the administrative steps of setting up a charity, and then not only setting up but also maintaining that. So in the kind of first part of the paper, we've just discussed the basic concepts of what a charity is, considering if that's the best option, what fund holding is, and briefly how that works.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really important to emphasize is that in my experience, there will kind of come a point where
Mm.
actually fund holding may not be the most appropriate because the entity or the group of people has grown. So it starts with the two of us. We've got a great idea. We want to do something. And then there's four more people that join us. And then there's 10 more. And at some point, you realize you've got a budget of $100,000. Like there's going to be a point probably where there will be an evolution and a step up from let's just have a fund holding kind of an arrangement with another charity to then say, actually, we are big enough in size where we need to formalize who we are. And what I've seen with some groups is that the first stages might last for months, might last for years, but at some point, crystallizing it into we are now our own entity actually helps them to get to the next level.
Mhm.
So, for example, they might then feel like they can go out into public and say, would you donate to us some, some money? But it's easier, it can be easier to do that once you have your own charity. So just as we're talking about this, bear in mind fund holding might be for a season. It might not be a
Mhm.
forever thing. And actually, for some charities or for some groups, it's a natural progression to become registered because then, of course, you get the tax benefits, and also you get the reputation. It's hard to become a charity. It's not easy. You actually have to meet criteria. You have to be advancing one of the four charitable heads. So, advancing education, reduction of poverty, advancing religion, or purposes beneficial to the community. So, while we're talking about fund holding, I just want to have emphasized that at some point in our experience, it's the right thing for a group to say, we're ready to become our own entity, get our own bank account, start employing people on our own as well. So, yeah. Then we have a section in the paper talking about fund holding, which, yeah, we've kind of gone into a bit already. Something you want to
Mhm.
draw out maybe from that diagram? You could tell them
Yeah.
about the different individuals or groups involved.
Yeah, so usually there's a few different groups that are involved in a fund holding arrangement. So there'll be the people donating or the organizations that'll be donating the funds, and that will go generally straight to the fund holder who, so they're the group that I guess, has the legal ownership over the funds, and then they have a relationship with the project or the group that's doing the work in the community, and then they'll have an arrangement of how the funds are used between them. And so you can see there's a couple different relationships there, and as you can suspect, there might be a few different legal arrangements as well.
Mm.
But usually, what we've seen in New Zealand is that the fund holder, the funds are donated to them, so they are their property, and then they kind of give them out um, on a kind of arrangement that they've previously discussed with the group or the project.
Yeah, so we've got a little diagram there talking about the grantor of the funds, the fund holder, and then the recipient of the funds. So just to be clear, there's different kind of actors within this scene. It's interesting to me. This is a total side topic, but I love little rabbit holes to go down. But the terminology. So how do we talk about people? What do we do? Because sometimes I think in the terminology itself, we emphasize certain things. So fund holder, even as an example, like, is that the right phrase? Or should it be something else? Because it almost implies a position of power if you're the fund holder as opposed to the recipient. So if you look in the fund holding agreement example, we talked there about fund holder, but then we also talked about the project steward and put in the definition kai ko kiri. So just I don't know the answer for your context, but it might be worth thinking about terminology and how we talk about things, because sometimes it can be a perpetuation of power. Like, I'm the grantor of the funds, I hold all the money, you're the person doing the mahi and the work. And actually, in some ways, the person doing the mahi and the work should be celebrated instead of being, I received the money, they're stewarding that work. So I don't have a real I don't have terminology that I say you should or shouldn't use, but just think about it in your context, what's going to be appropriate. Yeah. So then I think if you're on the call, hopefully you kind of understand some of the basics of why you might consider it. Um, we've gone into that. So the reason why fund holding is appealing is really that you don't have to set up your own legal entity at that point. And oh, great. Yeah. So I'm on to page
Page
number
nine.
9 now. Thanks for the comment there. Yeah, how it works in New Zealand. Why is fund holding appealing? Well, you came to this fresh
Mm,
because you've had
yeah.
a career in consulting and change management, and now you've come in to join us in the impact team looking at legal things.
Mm,
What struck you when you were thinking
yeah.
about fund holding? Because it wasn't something you'd been aware of before this, right?
No, not at all. Yeah, I think it was just a really unique take on how good work can be done in the community. I think for me, traditionally, you have the idea that charities or these established bodies do the work, and you think of the ways people get funds are grants or donations. And so I think this was a really interesting concept. And I think especially what drew my interest was for the kind of one-off projects or the projects that have a kind of definite scope or uh, I guess kind of start and end date. Like we want to clean up this river and that's the work we want to do. And I think fund holding is such a brilliant concept for groups like that and should be encouraged more because I think there's so many people in the community who want to do those kinds of things
Mm,
who, yeah, there are the groups like Stephen was saying that will eventually grow and might outgrow fund holding. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are the groups that might just want to do a couple one-off projects. And those are the groups that can really be supported by fund holding as well.
mm, yeah. So there's real benefits there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it can, I think it has the ability to apply to so many different people and groups.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen it come out in so many different contexts as well, like
Mm,
some even through DIA or government agencies.
mm,
I think some of them may be on the call actually, they can be interested in like, what would this look like for a community group? Doesn't exist as a legal entity, but we really love what they're doing. How can we get them money? And having a better understanding that fund holding is an option, you know, opens it up
mm,
because then maybe the money can go to this charity that then holds it on behalf of. So that leads us nicely to, in a way, some of the legal side, because one of the things that we would caution about fund holding is lack of clarity,
mm,
because very often the groups who need the fund holding are grassroots. They're just got a great, crazy idea. They've got some funding or they've got someone who wants to help them, but they may not have the background in governance or the background in legal documents and things. So I have seen it lead to trouble where there's some sort of an informal, you know, back of the napkin arrangement type of, hey, can you hold money for us? And yeah, no problem, that's fine. And okay, and that's it.
mm,
So in the paper, again, this is on page 9, we've said that it can be helpful to outline what's the framework for how this is done. And this is to safeguard not just the community group or the small, new initiative that's coming up. It's also to safeguard for the fund holder because that can lead to complications if you get money in and then it's unclear when is it released or who has power to be able to come and talk to us. So we've got a list here of what we think the terms of the fund holding might include. Do you want to run through
mm.
some of those? And yeah,
Yeah, yeah, so like Stephen said, there's a lot of different things that can be added to an agreement, depending on, I guess, the scope or how far you want to go. And we've got a few things listed there, but some important things that we would consider things like what would be the activities of the project, so what's the scope of the project, the key person or people that would be delivering the project, the purposes of the funds or the grants, and I think an important one, which is on a little bit further as well, is the ways that the fund holding relationship or agreement could be terminated. And I know when the word terminated comes up, we generally think of it being a bad thing that someone's done something, or something's gone wrong. But in this case, because of the nature of fund holding and kind of what we've said before, it might simply mean that the group just is ready to move on and create their own incorporated body, or the project's ended, and the work they want to do is complete. So I think having the ability to terminate the relationship means that both parties can move on amicably afterwards, and there's no confusion and untangling anything.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm just uploading it into the chat because somebody had sent me a message. So hopefully you can have a look at that, Leslie. I think it should be uploaded there. Yeah. So yeah, I think being clear where we up to the
Hmm.
activities of the
Yeah,
project,
activities,
the alignment.
some key people.
Yeah, there might
Yeah.
be key people who are delivering the project. This is important because if it's a community group, who do you take instructions from? Like, is it Jane or is it John or is it Philip or is it Philippa? Like, who are going to be the liaison persons? And those people may change over time as well. So that's important. Um, yeah, what's the purpose of the fund? Like, when can they get access to the money? Do they have to show that there's an invoice, or is there something that is proposed to be purchased, or some sort of equipment or something? Being clear on what that is important. And any requirements from the funder. What does the project need to be working towards? Are there any reporting requirements or anything like that? The liability for the activities. Liability is always important. Who's taking responsibility?
Yeah.
And then something that is worth mentioning is, are there some fees involved?
Mm.
Like, is this a pure pro bono type of thing? Like, we're going to hold the funds for you, or is there going to be a percentage of the amount that's held because there's admin costs, or there's, some work required by the fund holding entity or the charity? So, yeah, that's something to be thinking about as well. And we're going to get onto some examples in a minute
Mhm.
that we can look at. Um, so I guess having clarity on what is the fund holding arrangement is going to be helpful. And that was what led to Kate had reached out and we drafted this fund holding agreement, which is now in the paper there. So thanks, Kate, for letting us put that in. Hopefully it's helpful for people. The first thing to note about any legal agreement is it's not going to be, you can't just copy paste it and change the names at the top. You're going to have to think it through like, okay, what's our situation? What's our circumstance? But we hope that including it will at least allow you to think about what are some of the issues that we might want to cover in some sort of an arrangement. And also what's not covered there. I've yet to draft the perfect legal agreement. I know that's surprising.
Yeah.
There will be something that's missing. Maybe there's a different way to do the dispute resolution that would be more appropriate. I would love to have a version of this that incorporates more Te Reo Maori and talks about concepts in a different way. It's going to be different for each group as to what you have. But the point of putting it out there, like we're kind of going out on a limb by providing it at all, is that we want to stimulate discussion. We want to get people thinking and at least have clarity about what are the options to consider. Yeah. So I'm noting there's some comments in the chat, which is great. So we're going to come back to those pretty soon, actually, because there's not much left
No,
here.
yeah.
And then we'll do our best to answer them. I'm happy if any of you want to come off of, silent mode and actually speak to your question, or if you can help us with an answer, then that will be welcome when we get to that point. So the next page, page 10, we just talked here about just some things that we think you need to be aware of. You want to
Hmm.
mention what were
Yeah.
some of the things that stuck out to you?
I think what stuck out to me was the fact that it's important, or it can be important to have a separate agreement between members of the group. Again, it's a case by case basis, but I think that can help a lot with clarity and understanding different people's roles in the group. Maybe one's liaising a bit more with the fund holder, one might be in charge of the activity, something like that. But
Mhm.
I think it gives a lot more clarity. But it is important to note that, and I guess that's where you might want a bit of legal help of understanding how the agreement between the group and agreement with the fund holder might interact and
Yeah.
what the relationship there is. Other things are finding the right fund holder. So if a charity has specific purposes, say for education, and that's what they're approved with charity services on, they get their tax credit because of that charitable purpose, it might not be so appropriate for them then to have a project out in cleaning up the ocean, as amazing as that is. So sometimes it might be about finding the
Yeah.
appropriate fund holder.
And I'm glad you emphasize that because one of my concerns is that everyone on the call is going to go out and start finding people that they can fund hold for, but actually you have to come back to your charitable purpose. Like if those of you on the call are charities, what were you set up for? What is it that your remit is? Because it's probably more limited than you might think. And when was the last time you looked at your trust deed or your constitution or whatever form of, legally binding document that set you up is? Because quite often we talk to people and they say, yeah, we want to do this wonderful initiative. It's suicide prevention for university students. Wonderful, amazing cause. That's great. But let's look at what your trust deed says. You were set up to run a preschool for 3-year-olds. And over the decades, it's gotten morphed because you've been looking for funding and now you want to do this, but your purpose is very limited. It's only this. So I wouldn't want any of the charities on the call to get sidetracked by supporting Let's Save the Penguin initiative, but you were set up to do this other purpose. So good to emphasize that.
Yeah,
How about
definitely.
any others there?
I think we've got, yeah, so we talked about termination as well before, and I guess due diligence and oversight kind of links to what we were just talking about as well. As the fund holder, the fund holding charity, I guess you want to have oversight and you want to do your due diligence into the project and make sure you know who the project is or who the members are, what the project is actually about, and I guess have that regular contact with them as well. Yeah, I guess with anything, you don't want to give away funds and not have any oversight or connection. So I guess those are important things to consider in terms of when you're thinking about doing a fund holding arrangement in New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The chat, there's lots of comments
Mm,
there. Thanks everybody for putting comments and chats and answering each other's questions. That's awesome.
yeah.
We're not going to have anything to do with it. No, we'll have a look through and we'll answer the ones that we can in
Yeah.
the time. All right. So that kind of leads us to, we're on to page 11 now. And oh no, page 12. So
12.
we got a beautiful picture on
We
page 11.
do.
And the reason for this is we just wanted to give a couple of examples
Mhm.
that we were aware of, and we're really grateful for the people involved. Danuki's been reaching out and having
Yeah.
conversations, and
Yeah, very grateful for all of the support and information and emails. So yeah, thank you to everyone I've contacted.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So we're not going to read word for word what's here because you can have a look yourself. But I do want to acknowledge and kind of tautoko and respect Gift Collective and what they're doing. Should we have a brief chat on
Hmm.
what that is?
Yeah.
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 Do you want to outline and then yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Gift Collective was a really interesting when I first started looking into it before I'd contacted Cheryl and Chloe and Alana as well. It was so interesting to me because it's kind of this overseas model, um, and then they've brought it to New Zealand, but they're using an overseas or a kind of software that makes gift holding easy, but they've partnered with a New Zealand trust. And Cheryl and Chloe definitely jump in if there's anything you want to add. But I think it's just amazing how many different collectives or projects they've been able to support, and the amazing work. And as you'll see, if you have a flick through the paper, we've got a couple examples from collectives as well, just to kind of highlight the work that they've been able to do through the amazing work of the Gift Collective.
Yeah, and I guess the key thing, and it's coming up in the chat as a kind of a question, like what's the essential function that we get here is that the fund holder has a bank account, whereas the group doesn't
Mm.
have a bank account, or like that's one of the key functions. So, and that's what is provided here. So it's a really great example. Cheryl, do you want to jump off of mute and say any words? We've got your lovely quote here, but
Yeah.
if you'd like to say something, then you're welcome to.
Sure. Kia ora, everyone. Can you hear me all right? I've got new
Yeah.
headphones on. Great. Thanks. That's a great summary of Gift Collective. We're super excited about it. Our co-founder Alana's here on the call. Um, I don't know if there's anything else to add, really, just to say that it's a pretty broad, we've set it up as a very broad-based fund holding service. So it really can support any charitable entity, not charitable entity, charitable purpose within New Zealand. And I think one of the beauties of it, which Chloe could speak to if she wants to, is the transparency, because it's done through an online platform. It's not really just having a bank account, it's kind of all the accounting and the full transparency that the project can see exactly how much funding they hold any particular time, what it's been spent on, and what they've got left to spend. And the funders can see that as well within reason. So that's really nice transparency for the funders. So, yeah.
That's great.
Is there any other questions if anyone wants?
Yeah, and a shout out to Chloe and Ivana. Ivana, you're welcome to say something if you'd like as well. You've been a big support over the years.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I just want to say thanks to you, Stephen and Danuki and to Perryfield for doing this. I've been really hoping for a long time that this white paper would get out there, because I just think fund holding has a lot of potential for the charity sector in Aotearoa to can make things a bit more efficient. When I see like amazing community leaders or artists and people like that getting terribly bogged down in compliance paperwork, it like genuinely hurts my heart. So if we can find ways to make all of this easier on those people to use their precious energy on their mahi and on their community, then I think that's a great outcome where fund holding can be a good fit. So yeah, thanks for getting this over the line. Thanks to everyone who's interested in this topic. And I'm just having a great time in the chat nerding out over audit and tax policies and stuff, because I'm a huge nerd about this sort of thing. But I guess that's the point, is like get people who are compliance and spreadsheet nerds to take care of the compliance and the spreadsheets, so that people who are amazingly talented in other ways can spend their time doing those other amazing things.
Great. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Yeah, well, you're welcome to keep answering all these questions in the chat and putting in comments. That's really helpful. Yeah. And so, yeah, we had that as the first case study there. So I think what we may do after this, we'll send around a link where you'll be able to watch or have this video and a place to download the paper. But what we might also do, because there's a lot of really good comments coming through,
Yeah.
I think what we might do is extract the comments and put them in a little document, because that's like an FAQ. So we might create like an FAQ on the site. That wouldn't be hard to do.
That's a good idea.
So if we don't get to your question in the time we're about to have, then don't worry, we'll also have it, we'll make it accessible for others as well. So keep putting your questions and your comments in there. It's really good. The second case study, and in the paper we have some quotes from people talking about how these have been used. The second case study was Te Mukarau, and thank you, Kate, I see that you're in the chat there. So advance warning, I will probably ask if you'd like to say anything. You're welcome to. But Te Mukarau, what you've given us there was some quotes and things. So a small philanthropic trust supporting social cohesion and the central place of Te Ao Māori, the Māori world in Aotearoa, occasionally providing fund holding services for people and projects which are closely aligned with Te Mukarau's purpose. Examples include hapu-based rangatahi support and enabling the philanthropy of others. And yeah, just a shout out tautoko, and support the work that you're doing. And we have put that draft of a fund holding agreement, which was created based on our conversations. Kate, would you like to say anything about this initiative?
Kia ora, Stephen, and kia ora koutou. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we sort of fell into fund holding. We've done it 3 times now. Twice for small Māori grassroots, flax roots initiatives, and once we're just getting into sort of providing it for someone else who wants to provide funding as a grant maker. And it's a really cool thing to do, but it's not simple, and there is a bit of admin to it. So I really recommend the Gift Collective, because they do it professionally. And like for me, sort of paying out the money, I have to sort of create a spreadsheet and I have to be really meticulous about it, and it's which isn't my desired state. But it works fine for a reasonably simple low transaction thing. But I think the development of the gift collective, which is doing this professionally, is a really fine thing. And I really think it's a great thing for our sector to have more fund holding happening.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. So I guess the theme is that it's possible to do it, but there are options and think about them. So the gift collective sounds like it is a good option for people. Then the third one, so I was chatting with Simon Bowden, and he was mentioning, oh, the Arts Foundation. We have something that is kind of similar. I'm aware that there's going to be other case studies or examples, and we'd actually love to hear them. I think just for our own education, I think there's probably, for example, councils out there. I think councils sometimes do this. I don't know exactly how they justify it or they do it, but I'm pretty sure they do it with local community groups. And I'm sure that there's other examples. So this paper, it's not meant to be like that's set in stone, that will never change. I think for us, we'd like to refresh it in the future. So if you do know of other examples and you can point us to them and ideally introduce us to the people, we'd be really happy to put in examples or update the paper to better reflect things that we might not have got in the first draft. But the case study, the third one, we just had the Arts Foundation, so Te Tumatoi, established in 1998, and I think they have this thing called the Boosted Project, and with Boosted, it's probably best if I just read it. So the foundation is the only national arts organization that is empowered by the people. Those who donate to a Boosted project, of which there are now more than 120,000 donations, are entitled to a tax credit as the foundation is a registered charitable trust. Boosted is unique in the fact that if projects don't meet the target, all the proceeds are returned to the donors. This all or nothing model creates an urgency and focus for project owners. So I guess this is like a variation on crowdfunding in some ways, a way to get money to specific projects. So we wanted to put that in as another example, another case study. Yeah, but if you hear of others, then we're welcome that. We're on to page 16.
Nearly there.
We had a few barriers. We just thought, it's not all rosy. And in a way, what Kate was hinting at, there's admin involved. There's some, steps that have to be taken. So do you want to guide us through some of these lines?
Yeah, sure. And Craig, we did see your comments about some of the realities, and I think this kind of covers it, especially some of the more accounting considerations. So before we get into that, I think some of the other blind spots to fund holding is that, as we've touched on, it's a bit unknown. There are amazing people, as we've touched on, in the community, like Gift Collective and things that are really kind of at the forefront of fund holding. But I think to the general public and those coming in to do a charitable purpose, they might not know about fund holding. So yeah, the purpose of this paper, and hopefully going forward, we can just kind of create more awareness that this is a really cool opportunity for people. I think just general misconceptions as well about what fund holding is, and I guess that ties into like liability as well, misconceptions over liability or things like that, and that it's just a simple financial tool. But I guess there's more to it. There's an ability for both parties to create this relationship, and for the fund holder to really upskill themselves in some ways, and for this project to kind of become almost like a charitable arm that's doing some great work out in the community.
And actually, just picking up on that, in the chat, there's someone, Michael's put a comment, which I thought was really helpful, that said, it's mentioned that fund holding can lead to initiatives becoming their own entity. It's worth noting that another option is that the fund holder absorbs the initiative as a project of the fund holding charity. Obviously, this would only occur where appropriate, when in line with the fund holder's deed and mutually advantageous. So great comment. I think that's a really good point, is that actually it might be totally appropriate not to set up a new entity and to have it continue as a subset of an existing charity.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about fund holding, is that it's so like the future is so flexible with it. And yeah, like we said, this is just like a launch pad for the idea of fund holding and to talk about it, but it doesn't mean anything's kind of set in stone.
Yeah, there are different options.
Yeah.
I'll probably forget to say this later, so I'm going to say it now. Please help us spread the word about it. If the paper is resonating with you, then help spread the word. The easy way will be to send a link on to other people. I use LinkedIn a lot. That's a way to get information out. Post a link when we send it around, because that way other people can find out about it, and it might actually reduce. I think we said at the beginning, didn't we? Making doing good easier. Like that's the intent here, is that we actually support organizations. So if they don't know that it's an option, how are they going to be able to access it? So help us spread the word. Join the movement.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Any others that you wanted to highlight?
I think probably the last couple are kind of those more financial, technical accounting considerations. And I think probably more relevant for the fund holder. And I guess that's why it's really important to understand your role as the fund holder and have those agreements in place, get legal advice, accounting advice. I guess the AML, the anti-money laundering, and the financial services providers provisions might not come into play if the fund holder if they own the funds themselves, so they are their funds, they're donated straight to the fund holder. It's I guess you can run into issue if they're held on behalf of someone or if they're maintained for someone. So that's kind of where a distinction can be drawn. Again, this is just general speak and not advice, but I think, yeah, it's really important to understand your role and talk to someone who has the expertise, so you can avoid unnecessary liability down the line.
Yeah. And leading on from that is the anti-money laundering, and you have to do your due diligence on who's involved here, what's going on, particularly if there's potentially cash involved, or they're receiving money. I guess doing the due diligence is important. So there could be anti-money laundering type rules. I guess in some ways it depends on the scale or the size of things as well.
Yeah. Exactly, because if it's a big project or a big donation, even if you're not caught by these exact provisions, there's still going to be some kinds of due diligence that you'll want to carry out. And yeah, I guess that's where you'd want to get advice.
Yeah. I mean, what you want to do is always, if you're the entity that is doing the fund holding, you always want to make sure that you're operating within the purposes that you were set up for. And you want to make sure that you're not, without knowing it, breaching some rules or regulations. So I guess part of this is get the right advice, which always sounds self-serving if I say it, but it is true, like make sure that you're doing things the right way. So that leads us to part C. So this is on page 17. It's just the short little conclusion. The purpose of this paper is not a textbook. It's hopefully written in an accessible style. We didn't want it to be like a legalese sort of document. But what we did want to do is empower people to think about their options, particularly for those smaller groups who don't want to set up an entity themselves, but also for charities out there, or it could be a council, like a local government, could be a central government thing, could be a foundation, could be, one of the community trusts, could be a private individual trust or something set up from a group of people or a person. That actually there are some options to think about, rather than rushing immediately to let's set up a charitable trust and get tax registration and get charity services numbers and things. So that's kind of the conclusion. What struck you, like conclusion wise? What were your thoughts? Anything?
I think I was just excited, I think, by the concept of it. Like Alana was saying before, I think just the idea that we can help people who have so much like potential and talent and who want to do all of this good work, but aren't able to do it maybe because of the administrative side or because they're caught up doing other things. I think just helping more people do good work is just a fantastic concept.
Yeah, well, the way Alana described it really resonated with me.
Yeah,
Like it's so frustrating if people aren't able to do the good in society
Exactly.
because they feel
Yeah.
like they don't understand the mechanics of setting up a bank account or getting a charity registration, or for some reason they don't want to formalize it in that way, which I think in some ways we're stuck within the system that we operate in. Like we know about IRD numbers and getting registrations, but it's kind of a very Western approach if you think about it. Like you have to be registered in order to be recognized. Like we can't get a bank account unless you are an entity. Bigger philosophical points there, maybe. But interesting.
Valid.
Like I've written a paper about nature as a shareholder. What does it look like if nature itself owns shares of a company? Which I think we're grappling with in Aotearoa because we've given legal personhood to 3 different examples. Taranaki Maunga is the latest. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic. In the follow-up, I'll put a link to an article about that topic because separate but quite interesting. Like, what does it mean if nature is a person? Like, what would it look like if the lake owned shares in your company? Yeah, fascinating area. So then the final bit, we've put a whole bunch of links to things that we found helpful as we were reading. So that's on page 18. And so that might be helpful. And then the cross references back, there were footnotes through the paper. So hopefully that's helpful. And then Annexure 1 has the fund holding agreement. And then we've got the contact us info. So you're welcome to drop us a line. Let us know, what did we miss? What could we change? What can we add to? And then the final page, we've just got some pictures of different resources. So that's there. One of the resources that people tell us is helpful is the Charities Health Check. So that's a series of 6 guides where we look at assets, policies, procedures. We have a specific one on people, and it's asking a whole bunch of questions that help charities to think about their processes, essentially. That was, I wrote a version of that and then I shared it on LinkedIn, and more than 100 people helped me to refine it. So it's very much a crowdsourced document. It's not just me. It was like literally dozens and dozens of people giving me feedback about what was missing or what we should add, which is challenging when you get people changing the exact same wording multiple times from different people, but I think we got there, and I'm really proud of that Charities Health Check. So check it out. And also, just in the email, I said there's a consultation happening up until the end of this month about charities and tax. So if this topic interests you, that topic should interest you as well. Craig Fisher is on the call, and he and I and Jenny Gill are going to be leading a session. There's actually, for that one, I think we just hit 400 people have registered for it. So it's clearly striking a note of we need to know more. Our feeling is that all charities should be up to speed with the 15 questions that the IRD is asking, and hopefully submitting on what do you think. So on the 10th of March, we're going to be breaking down what does the IRD paper say, and that paper there, the charities and tax one, goes into it. Yeah, we've got other resources on charities and churches and more than could fit on this page. So hopefully that's been helpful. I thought what we might do just to finish off, yeah, we've got just a couple minutes. I commit to taking all of the comments that are coming through, because there's now quite a lot of them. And we will next go through those and try to put answers or responses back. And we'll aim to send that out to the whole group. So if we don't get to your particular question, don't worry, we will do our best to at least look at it and answer or reflect it. But you know what? We're so lucky because look at these amazing people. They've been putting answers.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, all the people Kate, putting answers already. Yeah. So let's go up to the top. Because there's so many, I'm just going to pick and choose some because we're not going to be able to do it, all of them. Yeah. All right. So Karen was asking, interested in the potential for fund holding by councils, especially considering social investment, environment, impact investing. I think it would be an option. I don't think I think I've heard about it in other contexts. Did you come across any councils that are
No,
doing it?
DIA, but
DIA?
yeah,
Yeah.
but not any
How are
councils that were
DIA
doing it.
doing it? Are they?
I think they've got a couple programs
Yeah.
that they're
So they'll support a community group, which isn't a legal entity,
yeah.
but they'll get the money to the right people.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was someone in Nelson I was talking to on that. Yeah.
Hey, Stephen,
Yeah.
I could just pop quickly in there.
Yeah, go for it.
A lot of it's to do, thinking now is around the impact investing and the social investment from central government, and how do we get projects of scale invested into into areas with smaller charities that won't reach the scale.
Right.
And so what role could councils play alongside iwi and Hapu that are already in the government sites, but what role can local government play around holding funds on behalf of social providers, even if they're not even charities? I mean, even if they are charities, but they're just small charities with small projects. That collective action approach is what I'm sort of thinking about a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah. I don't see why you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one of the themes that hopefully is coming through is that there's clarity on how much is it and the timeframes and who's the contact and how do we measure things, and that would be important. So
I think the agreement resource is fantastic. That's really helpful from a council's perspective as to how do we broker those relationships with
Yeah.
others, and hold the funds and administer the funds, take out all of the bureaucracy for them, make it easier for them to just get on with their mahi.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, that was the intent, is that it's not a perfect agreement, but it will at least get people thinking like, oh, these are the issues that we need to cover. Tracy had put in here, think it's really important for fund holders to sign off and approve the funding applications to ensure they're comfortable with what has been put forward. I think that's a really good point, because you might verbally hear something from a person, but actually the reality might be a little bit different if you ask them to, write it down. Barb had said here, do they pay interest on your funds? And Alana, thank you for answering, says it depends on the fund holder. That's one point that would definitely need to be clear in the MOU or the contract. So yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. If you aren't a registered charity and can't have a bank account, how does the project receive the funds? Especially if the project is based overseas, where paying invoices isn't an option. Yeah, thanks, Alana. That usually the fund holder's bank account is used. I guess it introduces extra complexities if it's offshore, because then you might potentially be jeopardizing the charitable status of the New Zealand-based entity if you're sending money offshore. There's basically, it's kind of a strange phrase, but are you operating, this is the phrase, wholly or mainly in New Zealand? And the way that that's determined by IRD is more than 25% of funds going offshore. If more than 25% goes offshore, then they'll look into whether you qualify for tax donee status. That's a 3-year rolling average. So there might be a tsunami somewhere. So you support more offshore one year, and that compensates for the next year. But I guess if you are sending funds offshore, it might introduce extra complexities that you need to be thinking about if you're holding funds. Yeah. Thanks, Craig. Clarity and understanding your charitable purpose is a great point. Important to be aware of it, ensure that it lines up. Yeah, definitely. And then Craig's former financial auditor, wired to wear a black hat? No, not really. Can't help but think of the financial and the broader risks. Reality and understanding of responsibilities and liability is essential. Yeah, there's a danger here that we're making it sound really simple and easy, but hopefully, hopefully you're also realizing that there is quite a lot involved, and that way that might be something that you need to think about in terms of, is this something that we do ourselves, or do we look for another source, which obviously we've heard the Gift Collective is there doing this very regularly. Paul, thank you for your comment. Fund holding will make the sector more efficient and effective. New Zealand has many more charities per head than just about any other country, and many are too small to be effective. That's a great point, especially around admin and reporting. I actually, just to riff off of that, there's 29,000 registered charities. It's a bigger question, but what if we consolidated some of those small ones and they came together instead of having 5 charities that each employ 5 different people who are doing the same thing? What if there was one person who did it for all 5? Or better yet, amalgamate and come together, right? So that's we're having a lot of that's a different issue comments, but it's true. It is.
Good.
Yeah. All right, Carolyn, listening to this, I'm thinking of some local entities like Rotaries, Lions Clubs that would benefit. That's a great point. It's interesting that Rotaries themselves are not registered charities. They are incorporated societies who act for the benefit of their members. But very often Rotaries will set up charitable trusts that sit alongside the Rotaries. So I've helped Rotaries set up charitable trusts to advance education. So like, we're going to get money, we're going to run a book sale. That's quite a common one in Rotary. We're going to raise $10,000 and it's go to scholarships for children or young people. So that will be put through the Rotary Charitable Trust. But you raise a good point. Maybe this would be an option for them as well. Good. Well, I'm just conscious of time. I really appreciate all of these messages and the comments. So what we're going to do is pull them out, and we commit to sending them around. Be watching your inbox. There was, I think, about 90 people who'd signed up for this, so a bunch have emailed and said they couldn't make it on the day. But really, if you'd like to help this movement to grow, to increase understanding, please help us spread the word. We just hope that the paper is a catalyst to get discussion going and that people understand that there's options. So we hope this is helpful. If you did like it, then we have got a bunch of other resources on our website for free. I also am doing Seeds podcast, 432 conversations with inspiring people now. And I do another one called Board Matters for the Institute of Directors, which is all about governance. So as a law firm, we're committed to being there and supporting the for-purpose sector. We do disputes work, we do property work, we do corporate commercial work. So this paper is really kind of hopefully a helpful thing to get people thinking. But we can also support with legal issues. If you ever have any, feel free to reach out to us as well. So thanks everyone for joining, and be watching for the links. We'd love to stay in contact, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Ka kite anō.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.